Hello. Today I want to show you the interface of the Adobe Illustrator program. This is on a Mac computer. So this is what you should see in any of our computers in the computer lab. Once I open up Illustrator, this is what will generally come up in this dialog box. So today what I'm going to show you is how to open a file, but then also how to create a new file. We'll do most of what I'm going to do in today's video in the new file. But say that you want to open a file. This would be where you could come in and open. I'm going to press the button here on the left saying open here. And when open comes up, a dialog box. And this is actually where I was at the last time that I searched for something in this program. But just to kind of make you aware of, you can see that I have some favorites here that help me to easily find and navigate files that I need. If you have an external hard drive or a flash drive, it will probably show up somewhere around here. But this is how you're going to navigate. And generally we think of this little pop-up as a finder window, or what would be similar to maybe in a PC, like a directory of what's on your computer. Now, if I let this sort of bottom pop-up menu come up, the finder here is this icon, and it essentially is the exact same thing we have here. Except I went in and just pressed the open from the actual software here. So a couple things that I want to show you is in here, you can actually change how you see your files. So if I come up to this icon here, click and hold, I can change this to icons. When it is icons like this, I can go through and see little thumbnails of the file that I'm looking for. Of course, I prefer to have it under list view here. And then you can also do it under columns. And columns can be super helpful if you're moving files from one thing to another. For example, if I go to my classes and I'm going to scroll down to this class here, and I'm going to scroll down to Illustrator tutorials, and then number 1, Romero software files, and I go to day 1. I could take all of these, so in using the columns, I can click on this one and then hold the shift key, and then I can move these over here, and it's not going to let me move because I'm actually in Illustrator, and Illustrator doesn't allow me to move things in my Finder window. But this may be what could be a useful way to do this, is using the columns. Otherwise, I prefer to use the list view. I find this easiest for me to navigate, and on occasion I will go to icons so that I can actually see little thumbnail images of the files that might help me to be able to recognize the file that I'm looking for. All right, I'm going to go back to list, and I'm going to press cancel because I don't actually want to open any of those files at this time. All right, now let's go up to new file. I'm going to go ahead and click this, and a new dialog box comes up and it says new document. The neat thing about Illustrator is that it generally remembers the last several documents that or the size of the documents that you've used. So if you use a size pretty frequently, then it will generally show up here. Otherwise, Illustrator has provided a number of presets that you can utilize here. So I can go to my saved if I had any saved ones. For this class, we're going to primarily use the print tab here, and I'm going to navigate just to the letter. Okay, and then when we move over to the right side of this dialog box, you can see here that by default it goes to points, and you may not be as familiar with points as a unit of measurement, so you may want to go down to inches, where you can see 8.5 by 11 here. You can always manually go in and type in whatever size that you need. I want to keep it as 8.5 for 8.5 by 11 here. This first line here, which I skipped over, is the file name. And this is a good place, and I would also say a good practice to go ahead and just start giving your files a name so that you don't get a series of untitled 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So the naming convention that you're going to end up doing for this class is going to be your first name, underscore, last name, and then you can write whatever it is that you want here. If that is some sort of cue to you, all I'm interested in is that you have your first name, underscore, and last name, so that when you upload them to D2L, it's easiest for me to navigate and find your file because I can look up by your first name. All right. So you can also change the orientation by clicking these. So if I click on horizontal versus the vertical here, you can see it swaps these out. And then we can have different number of artboards. Now, for the sake of what I'm showing you right now, we're going to leave this at 1. I'll talk to you more about having multiple artboards in the future. I'll also go over some of these other aspects of setting up the file at a later date. So I'm going to go ahead and press create, and you can see that create has created a visual of the 8.5 by 11. I personally like to use it like this because I can see the scale and proportion of things that are going onto this piece of paper. However, you might find yourself in a situation in which your artboard doesn't show up like this, and it might show up looking like this, where you have an entire screen of just white, and regardless of how you move around the artboard or if you zoom in or zoom out, it won't matter because you can't see it in context to the actual size of your final product. So I prefer to always have it where I see the artboard, so I'm going to press show artboard so I can get it back to the size and proportion of what I'm working with. Okay, so this is the artboard here. Anything that you have in your artboard. So Illustrator doesn't just save what's on the artboard, it saves everything that's around it as well. So you have to be really careful. We'll talk about that in the future as we're preparing our files for printing, but this will kind of give you an idea of what the artboard will look like. All right, so to give you some ideas about how to navigate and what different parts of this interface looks like, let's go through and just kind of talk about the different parts. So at the very top here, we have a navigation bar here. And one thing I want to make you aware of is the word Illustrator is actually has a drop-down menu. So if I click on that word, you can see that I have some options here. And this is where I can go ahead and quit it as well. But this is also where I can change some preferences if I need to do that. And here, instead of using the word preferences, it's called settings. So if I just slide over to General, you can see a new dialog box comes up, and you can see the top actually says Preferences and not Settings. And then we can navigate through these different parts by doing this. So I just wanted to show you what that looked like. Okay, so I'm going to press Cancel here. But in any case, this is our navigation bar here where we have our different options, and we can click on them and they have a bunch of different things underneath each of these headers. Before we actually talk about the different parts within this interface here, I do want to make sure that we are all looking at the same thing. So what I mean by that is Illustrator does a really good job of creating different layouts and accessibility to different tools depending on what the project is and what you're working on. So for example, say that I want to do some sort of painting in of an illustration. When I click on that at the top right menu here, so I'll go to the top right in the gray window here, and I'm going to go to painting. When I click on that, different tools and different options show up, and generally what this does is that Illustrator has identified the most commonly used tools and features that you might use if you were working on a project like this. So for example, say that I don't want to do painting, but rather I want to work on some typography. If I click on that, you can see I have a different set of tools and different options here as well. What we're going to work on in this class is we're going to use the Essentials Classic. So let's go ahead and select Essentials Classic. It may be that depending on other classes, they may set set this differently. So even if I were to have it at Essentials Classic, so if I click on this and I come in here and I change something, and you get rid of all of these panels here, you may end up confused. So even though you might go up here and it says, oh, it's Essentials Classic, but it doesn't look exactly like what you were working with, this is where you want to make sure that at the beginning of class, if it looks like you're missing some things, come into the Essential Classics and scroll down to Reset Essentials Classic. And then what this will do is that it will bring back our tools and in the same location as we were working before. Okay, so that includes what's going on here and what's going on over here. All right, so now that we're all under the Essentials Classic and we've reset it, let's go ahead and start talking about the different parts of what we are seeing here. The first thing is that this, in addition to this navigation bar here, we have this bar here. And this bar here is called a controlled strip. This control strip here changes depending on the different tools that you might use. So for example, if I click on our gradients here, you can see that I have different options. So the options will change depending on the tool that we're using, and that will change here. This will also be the case for this little bar down here. This little bar, so I just moved it by clicking on this light gray vertical line. I clicked and held it, and then I can move it around. This bar will do the same thing as far as changing with the tool, and this bar is called a contextual taskbar. And like I said, this will change depending on what you're working with. It will also kind of can change its location every time you open up a file or you move things around. So I might move it over here temporarily. If you want your contextual taskbar to always be in the same location within the window itself, you can always click it here or move it here and then click these three dots here. And then I can do pin bar position. And then it doesn't matter what I do as I move things around, it's always going to stay in this position. So it's really up to you what your preference is. I prefer to not have it pinned, but rather move it around as I need. All right, so we have the control strip, we have the contextual taskbar. This area right here is called a toolbar, and it has all of these tools here, okay? So with this toolbar here, I prefer to have it where I have two columns of tools, mainly because I've just used this for so long and this is how I best know where my tools are through memory of where I have my tools placed. However, you can click on this double arrow and you can make it so that it is a single line of tools, but like I said, my preference is to have the two columns. I would suggest for at least the very beginning of the semester that you use the two so that as I'm pointing out different tools, you can easily navigate and locate them as you can follow along with me. All right, so toolbar. All of these over here, so these little icons here and this area here is called panels. These panels give you options within the tools here. So for example, if I were to take a tool and I'm going to do something like this, okay, they're just little lines. I can change these by clicking on an icon over here and it will give me options. So this is just a line. And using the line itself, I can see that the only option I'm getting here is just the line weight. But, and knowing this software, I know that there are more features, more options here. And I can always double check by going up to this top little three line here, clicking show options. And when I show options, you can see I have a lot more that is available to me. So as I'm kind of moving around this, I can always just double check to make sure that all of the options are shown. So show options, this will give me more. So you see how some of these are shown and some of them are hidden. You can always find more things within your toolbar or in your panels here by checking to see if all of the options are being shown. Okay, with that being shown here, I'm just going to delete that. Let's talk a little bit about how we can organize this as well. So as you can see, these icons represent different tools or the options for the tools, okay? So say that I want to work with a gradient, okay? And here are all my options within the gradient, and for some reason I'm working on something and I don't want it to collapse. So I'm actually gonna pull this out. So if I click on the tab and pull it away, I can get it so that it stays on my, not my artboard, but my interface here so that I can get access to it at any time. So you can always kind of grab the tab and move things around, okay? Say that in working with this, you're like, all right, I used it and I need to put it back over here, okay? I'm going to do a couple things. So you see where it has the blue line. If you have the blue line as I'm moving it around, you can see that this is where it's going to connect it to. So if I connect it here, for example, it makes it a third column of panels. And I don't really want that because it will continue to, cover up the area of my artboard. So I'm going to actually pull this back out again like this, and you can see that that collapses. I'm going to take this gradient tab and I'm going to hover, and I'm going to hover in between. And you can see that in this section here with the, this is going to be the stroke and the transparency, I am going to nest it in there, in between the two. You can see kind of the blue line showing up. And then when it does that, it gets back into its original place. So you can see that in this little panel here, they actually have two panels or two tool options within this panel. And we can see that because we have kind of this grayish little dash line here that you can see where it's nested. And it's really up to you and your personal preference about how you sort of organize this. Certainly you can use just like we did with the toolbar, where we can click on the double arrows here to expand it. You can also do that here, depending on how much space that you would need as you're working. I'm going to come back into the gradient here, and I'm going to pull gradient out because I want to show you one other thing. So say that I'm working with the gradient, I forget, as I'm working quickly, I forget to actually put it back into all of these panels, and I just click the X here. And I click the X to get rid of the tool, and I keep working. And then I go back and I'm like, wait, where's my gradient tool? Can't find where my gradient, and actually the gradient tool is here, but the options is over here. So you can always find this by going up to your window in the navigation menu here. And when you get to about halfway down where it says like this 3D and materials, all of your options or your panels are all listed here alphabetically. So I just use gradient, so let's look for the gradient, and as I click on this, it comes back up. It doesn't open up here because I haven't nested it back, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, there it is. Okay, say that you need a tool, but you're not sure what the icon looks like. You can always come back over here, look for it. I'm going to come to stroke, for example, and I click on stroke. You can see that it then opens up the stroke panel that is already nested in the side panel here. All right, so now that we know the different parts, actually we need to cover one more. I apologize. At the very bottom, we have this controlled, actually this is called the status bar. The status bar here just has a few things in here, but can be super helpful. One is it tells you how zoomed in you are on your project sheet or your artboard. So here I can change in manually like this, or I can change the zoom, and I can also make it really small, and then back to 100%. If I needed to rotate my artboard, like this, for example, I can do that here. You might be asking yourself, why would I rotate my artboard? Well, there might be some situations in which you want to do that. For example, if you're working with a Wacom tablet and you're drawing, perhaps it will be easier to draw a line in this direction than it would be if it was perfectly vertical. So that might be a reason why you might change the orientation. And then this next one here shows the different artboards. If I had more than one artboard, it would be listed here. Okay, so I have the navigational bar here, I have the control strip here, toolbar, status bar, the contextual taskbar, and then all of our panels here. Okay, so now that I have that, I do want to show you a little bit about how you can move around the artboard. So you saw that I can move this artboard up and down. And what I'm doing, and you can't see, is I'm actually using a traditional or more traditional mouse that actually has a wheel on it. And as I'm rotating the wheel up and down, it's moving the artboard up and down. You can actually do that in our classroom using the Mac mice by using just your finger or fingers by moving along the top ridge of the mouse. That will also kind of create the same movement that I'm doing with this wheel. Okay, so I can move up and down, and a way to move left and right, I can certainly come down here and scroll left to right like this. But it's really kind of hard to click on this little slider here. So we're going to look for other ways to make this a little easier. So what we're going to do here is we're going to click on or hold down. So we're going to press on the space bar. When I press on the space bar, you can see that it changes my cursor to a little hand. This hand tool allows me to grab and sort of move things around like this. Okay. This is super helpful and super easy, and you can use this at any time, even if you're working in a different tool. You can always hold down the space bar and move it around. When you click on the space bar, like I said, it changes the cursor to a hand. This tool is also right here. It is the hand tool. So if you click on the hand tool here, it will get you to the same place. You can also, a quick key command is the H key, which makes it a H is for hand, and that will also get you there as well. All right, so we have a way to kind of move around. Now let's talk about zooming in and zooming out. We have a magnifying glass that's just below the hand tool. The short key command is Z, so you can press the Z key here, and the way that this works is that it brings up a magnifying glass that has a plus symbol here by default, and every time I click on it, it will zoom in, something like this. Okay, I can also change it to zoom out by holding down the Option key. If I hold down the Option key, I can click, and every time I click, it changes it and zooms out. Okay, so that is one way to do that. I can also use other short key commands like using Command plus. As I'm doing this, it allows, it zooms in. I can also do Command minus that zooms out. I can do Command 0 that kind of fits to page. And I can also, I'm just going to change this because right now it is at 100%. But let's go ahead and I'm just going to zoom out. So I'm going to do Command minus. I can also do Command 1 and it changes it to 100%. So this would be a good way to sort of zoom in and zoom out. And then, of course, the space bar in order to move around. All right, one last thing that I want to do before we move on is that I want us to move our layers panel, which is this icon right here. It has these two sort of diamonds. I'm going to click on that because I want to open up layers, and I want to click and drag layers, and I want to add it up here to the top. The reason why I want to add it to the top is that we're going to use a lot of layers. Layers is a pretty dominant feature within this software, and we want to make it more prominent and easier for us to get to. So if you've worked with Photoshop, you may be familiar with layers. If you haven't, the concept or the idea of layers is that layers is like stacking pieces of paper. The layer that's the furthest at the bottom is literally like a piece of paper at the bottom of the stack. And every time I add a new layer, it stacks it on top of, so that I have stuff that's on top or on front, go to the front or go to the back. So this will allow me to overlap and layer different components. The organization of this is important because some of our tools will not function if you don't have things correctly stacked. But we are going to use layers a lot in this class, so I want to make sure that you move that over, and let's make that easier to read. All right, and then the next thing I want to do is I want to just show you, I'm going to come down to the bottom right in this panel here, and I'm just going to click a couple times to add a few layers. So you can see that I now have 5 layers, and they're all visible right now. So I'm going to go to layer 1, and you don't have to do this along with me, but I'm just going to add something to each layer so that you can see what I'm talking about. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to do that, and let's see, move this over just so that I have something in each of the different layers. Like that. I'm still just making it pretty simple here. Whoops. Not moving along. Okay, and then I'll do one more thing. Let's do some type. Okay, so as I was saying about layers is a stacking. Okay, so say that I only want to see layer 1. I could go through and I can click these individually. Okay, I could also, instead of doing this, I could click and drag like this to deselect everything except the bottom, and then I can go in and reselect. I could also hold down the Option key and click on the eyeball that's in here, and this will turn off everything other than in layer 1. Okay, so that is another easy way to sort of navigate. You can do that in anything. So say that I want only layer 3. I can hold down the Option key, click the eyeball, and only what's on layer 3 is shown. Okay, and again, I can turn these on and off like this. It's pretty easy to do that instead of having to click every single one. This is really easy right now, but honestly, you're going to have many layers, 50, 100 layers, and it's so much easier to know that you can click and hold to turn off, or you even use the Option key, so that it makes it a lot easier than having to go through and click these individually. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and conclude this video, and our next video we'll start to explore and work with some of our tools.